focus. The President will be launching the reading revolution during the first quarter of the school calendar year. And we're hoping that we'll be able to galvanize our nation to get to reading, because a reading nation will get schools to read, will get learners to read. International best practice has shown that until you get reading embedded in our nation, schools will continue to struggle with getting learners to read and write and count. We're also about implementing a curriculum for skills and competencies for a changing world. And we've given some examples of areas of focus there. The three-stream model is one such area of focus. We're talking about the academic stream. Our system is over 90% focused on the academic stream. We need to shift the focus so that you've got about 30 to at most 40% of learners only who pursue the academic stream. And the rest must be split between the technical vocational and technical occupational stream. I must, however, warn that technical education is expensive. The nation will have to invest a lot of financial resources to make sure that we succeed in getting our split right. And once we get that split right, our economy will be on the right trajectory. This country will be able to compete with the best in the world. But until then, we'll continue to struggle because our education system is lopsided. Over 90% of learners are channeled towards the academic pathway. The fourth industrial revolution is an area of focus, entrepreneurship, and schools of specialization. Gauteng is one such province that has really moved and leading the pack in the area of schools of specialization, and we're looking at supporting all other provinces to move in this regard as well. Quality and efficiency in our system, and we believe that standardized assessments will go a long way in helping us in this regard as well. But we're also looking at, as the minister announced, introducing the General Education Certificate to create a sound basis for our young people to pursue different pathways. The pathways that I've indicated already, at the moment, you don't have a sound anchor, a sound basis to inform parents and learners as to which pathway to pursue, whether academic, technical vocational, or technical occupational stream. We believe the General Education Certificate will go a long way in helping us with that. ECD is another area of focus. It's not only about having a solid foundation for the entire system, but the government has already made a decision that ECD must move to basic education so that it's aligned with the rest of the delivery of education. Infrastructure is another area of focus. And I always make this observation that our major challenge in infrastructure development, it's around capacity. The build expertise, capacity within the build industry to deliver on infrastructure. Government has invested a lot of financial resources in infrastructure, but we don't have the requisite capacity. The last area of focus is around social cohesion, is around health and school safety, and this will become much more prominent as I continue with my presentation. Well, indicators of performance, one such barometer is the National Senior Certificate. The other one is international assessments as well as regional assessments, the systemic evaluation, and again, as I indicated earlier on, the General Education Certificate. We also use social justice principles to measure progress, and I will indicate that during the course of the presentation. But what is the size and shape of the basic education sector? And this is very important, and I'm quite impressed, especially ever since we've been sharing this information with journalists, which I should have acknowledged also in my opening statements, that this has helped a lot to educate the nation that at times it's important that when you compare, you're able to compare apples with apples and not apples with vegetables. Because sometimes we tend to compare apples with vegetables. We compare apples with watermelons, and I'm not sure whether we can do that. Now, the size and shape, this is who we are. 10 education departments delineated as you see them on the screen, and of course giving details there, and we call ourselves the basic education sector. We are a basic education national department, but plus the 9 provincial education departments, we are the basic education sector, and the sector that is part of the education and training system, which includes higher education and training. And we've got 25,000 schools, as you can see, 12 million learners, and over 400,000 educators. We account for over 98% of what happens in education in this country. We account for that. The rest then goes to other structures or other entities, and that's a summary. What's about the class of 2019? This is the 6th cohort to sit for the National Senior Certificate based on CAPS. This class started with grade 1 in 2008. The class has also benefited for gradual improvement in school-based assessment. We've prioritized school-based assessment because over time, as it is indeed the case in most parts of the world, school-based assessment takes over assessment. But at the moment, we're busy building school-based assessment. We've also emphasized on formative school-based assessment. We've seen an improvement in the standard of our question papers. CEO of Umalusi. And I was sharing with some of the colleagues that one of the papers of economics, our young people were expected to solve for X in respect of our current challenges of ESCOM. And the question that they were asked was that, why is it that ESCOM is not viable and yet it enjoys the monopoly of providing power? That's the nature of the questions that you have. And this is just an example out of a myriad other questions that you can find in our question papers. I remember when I was invited in the Western Cape, the former Premier of the Western Cape, Premier Zele, said, the standard of our question papers is so high that if many of us were to go back and write in these papers that our young people are writing, she wonders as to whether we would even get up to 20%, although the argument all the time is around 30% and 40%. This class also benefited from policy interventions of policy on progression, and policy on progression has improved our throughput rate from 30% to 53%. We're now competing with other developing countries in the world around the throughput rate of 53%. The multiple exam opportunities, the Council of Education Ministers took a decision that 2019 was the last year of MEOing learners, multiple exams opportunities. And I said to some of the colleagues, HOD, Western Cape, 2020, where I come from in the Platteland on say, that gaan bietjie broekskeer, is going to get really tough because modularization is not going to come to anyone's rescue. But I know that my colleagues are equal to the task. I can see they are here. we're going to work flat out. Some of us are going to live in those schools that are not performing and to make sure that they are performing. I want to appreciate and acknowledge members of the Portfolio Committee. I see them seated right in front here. Well, South African Sign Language, second year, introduction of technical subjects in the form of specialization in technology subjects, the abolishment of designated list of subjects in 2018, which will explain some of the increase that we continue to see in bachelors, admissions for bachelors. Early childhood development is very important as a foundation. These are the skills that we expect to benefit from in the system. You can see how the system has grown in terms of also the accommodation of 5-year and 6-year-olds in the system. Learner support for the class of 2019, we use what we call National Strategy for Learner Attainment. Basic education is a terrain of an avalanche of acronyms. So it's important that we explain some of them. We've got many of these acronyms. NSLA stands for National Strategy for Learner Attainment. It's got several pillars whose intention is to focus the system on supporting learners. It's an accountability tool for all levels of the system, right from national, provincial, district, school, up to classroom level. We take a multidisciplinary approach. It helps to align the different spheres and levels of government and ensure that there's support and monitoring. But why the NSLA? We need the learner support program through the National Strategy for Learner Attainment because our curriculum is wide. And apart from that, we do have instances where teachers are forced to teach at the pace of the slowest learner. There are instances where we need to provide support to teachers in terms of subject content knowledge. Not only pedagogy, the teaching methodology, but subject content knowledge. We need the NSLA to mitigate the cost of extra tuition. Extra tuition is growing all over the world, and it makes education extremely unaffordable. And in South Africa, government continues to intervene, and I take my hat out for my colleagues in the midst of cost containment and biting budget cuts. They protect these young people and to make sure that they receive the requisite support that they need. The cognitive demand continues to increase in our question papers. I've given an example already that in one paper they were expected to deal with our current questions. And questions in our question papers are contemporary, including history, by the way. It's not the study of the past only. In history, they were asked even about the significance of establishing a bank for BRICS and so on. Service delivery protests have become a permanent feature of our communities. And that takes a lot from us because in certain instances, learners have to be bused from their communities, not only for safety, but to make sure that they receive quality tuition, but they continue to write exams as well. There are 3 layers to this support. The other one is about basic functionality, which is the first wave, quality education, providing LTSM, time on task. The second wave is really school-based, teacher-led, individualized, small groups, support, additional lessons, close identified gaps, and accelerated progress. And the third wave is differentiated support, differentiated support in terms of your gifted learners, average learners, learners who are struggling. Some of these learners or these learners who are here benefited from all of these interventions or support programs. These are the modalities. In the interest of time, I wouldn't get into details in terms of the modalities. And when we met with the President on the 3rd and presenting the results to the President appreciated the learner support program. Because I said to him, President, I can afford to pay for extra tuition for my children. But what about those who are unemployed? What about those who are poor? Who mediates for support for those? And the President promised that he'll continue to support us and even talk to Treasury to make sure that there is money set aside to ensure that learners whose parents cannot afford the means for support are indeed supported. Vacation classes constitute the biggest chunk of our support, as you can see, and teams from the Department of Basic Education, national, from provincial departments, from district level, from circuit level, go out to monitor the vacation classes. They get into sitting in those lessons during extra tuition, observe and make conclusions about the quality of teaching during these vacation classes. We go all out to make sure that we get value for money. Welcome, Premier and MEC. What is the size and scope of this enterprise of the National Senior Certificate? I must say that the country invests a lot of financial resources at the exit point of schooling. I think we need to find creative ways of investing more of our financial resources even lower down the system, so that increasingly we begin to move the national psyche, not only to focus on the exit point of our schooling system, but other points, other exit points in the system as well. Full-time candidates, over 600,000, 616,754. Full-time, part-time candidates, 170,963. We had 147 question papers, and 8 million question papers were printed. We had 6,870 examination centers across the 9 provinces, 65,000 invigilators, 7.5 million scripts, which were marked over a period of 10 days. We had 45,500 markers, and we had 141 marking centers. In terms of full-time enrollment, the system is stable. We're still around 600,000. Our peak was around 2015. We dropped a little bit. My argument is always that policies of government are working, MEC Makwe, especially family planning policies of government. I come from a family of 9 siblings. We've got an average of 2 children among ourselves. And what helped us is education also, because before we thought about our families, we had to think about the modality of transport, affordability of the family. Things are not as easy as they used to be during my dad's time and mom when they were planning their family. So the population is quite stable. Just to do a comparison there, we've slightly dropped, as you can see, overall by about 7,979. And there are only 2 provinces that went up. Gauteng is one of them, and understandably so. Gauteng is the hub of the inward migration from outside the country, and from even inside the country. So that accounts for that. And Free State, surprisingly, MEC Makwe, you've seen a growth there as well. Well, full-time candidates who entered and wrote, and we're giving the difference there. Part-time candidates, fairly the same as last year, slight drop of about 5,000 or so, but essentially last year remaining the highest in terms of part-time candidates. The gender split, the girl learners still remain dominant in the system, which is a healthy indication of our society. This is an important slide, and I hope I will succeed today, especially with my professors, Professor Volmik, who will be doing the analysis of this data after the release of these results. And what is significant is age 18. Learners who are 6-year-old turning 7, they should be finishing schooling when they turn 18. But look at what you have. Maybe some would start school later than 7 years. We could, also then say maybe they could fail once. They would finish at age 19. But look at those who are still 20, 21, 23, 24, 25. Imagine a 26-year-old in the classroom, full-time. Now, part of the problem is that you don't get funding for this. Funding is based on learners who are of school-going age, which means that provincial education departments are put under undue pressure to fund learners from financial resources that are not provided. That's one. Two, our problem is not dropout rate, MEC Tate. Our problem is failure and repetition rate. If people can stay in the system up to age 26, it means they are serious. They really want to meet the requirements of the National Senior Certificate. And therefore, the analysis must not be just horizontal. It must be much more in-depth for people to understand, which means 60.4% of our young people finish schooling on time. They finish schooling within 12 years, only 60.4. But it doesn't mean that they are lost in the system if they don't finish. They repeat. Some of them finish schooling after 15 years, after some even more than 15 years. So you can see comparing 2018 and 2019, the good news is that we are beginning to narrow the graph from the right. It moves to the left. As it moves to the left, it means we're reducing those who are of overage. And there are those who are underage in the system who are also not funded, over and above those who are overage. Okay, and then this is subject enrollment. The sad news is that we are not doing well in terms of the enrollment of gateway subjects. If we continue with this pattern, if we don't stamp, if we don't intervene meaningfully, which we have started to do, we might be sitting over time with skills that would require in future. We might not have chartered accountants in future, but we know what caused that problem as well, because at some point we forced learners and schools to take accounting with mathematics, and it contributed to the drop in the enrollment in accounting. We've reversed that policy because we were advised that it's not the right policy intervention. Progressed learners, only 2 provinces dropped, the rest went up. It's Gauteng and KZN. You can see the veto power carried by Gauteng and KZN, and they dropped the whole population of progressed learners by 2,943. That's the veto power they carry, those 2 provinces, because of the numbers that are involved in those 2 provinces. Learners with special education needs entered and wrote And again, part-time candidates comparing 2016 to 2019. Social grants, enrollments, this is very important. There's abject poverty in this country, and you'll see how, the pathology of poverty manifests itself even in the analysis of data. Correctional services, I always say, for basic education, there's no place to hide. We will follow you up to even behind bars, because we are interested in you meeting the requirements of the National Senior Certificate. We work with officials in correctional services centers to support these young people so that when they come out of these centers, they can be successfully integrated in our communities. They have the requisite skills that we require. Standardization, because it's not my turf, I can see the CEO of Umalusi saying, where are you going now? We're just saying it's an open secret. Professor Volmik released this data a few days ago. This is the trend. What is important is that if the decisions in the main are made on raw marks are the marks of learners from their scripts. In other words, Professor Volmik and the Assessment and Standards Committee will say, oh, we see how learners have performed, and they can say, well, we don't think the papers were too easy. If they were too easy, they say, no, let's bring those marks a little down. If the papers were deemed to be a bit unfair or too difficult, then they raise them. It's very important that we understand how standardization works. It's not about doling out marks. It's an international best practice. Large-scale exams cannot survive without standardization. Your performance is going to hop like this every year. I wish Dr. Rakometsi could share this platform with me. He's best placed to explain this. What has been our trend? We've almost increased our output in terms of grade 12 results by tenfold. And we're taking our benchmark from 1970, when very few people did grade 12 or standard 10 at that time. So we've increased that by almost tenfold. Well, these are the results. What has happened now? There's some color blocking somewhere there. Or maybe because they knew that there are people who leak this information before the minister releases the results. And what is crucial is that in 2009, when Minister Motshekga joined the ministry in basic education, there was something called, Dr. Rakometsi, the glass ceiling of 70%. She succeeded working with MECs, of course, to break the glass ceiling of 70%. The highest performance was in 2013 by 78.2, and then the system repeated that performance in 2018 with 78.2. And I'm praying very hard that we don't go lower than that. The rest, I leave it for the minister. Okay, and then in terms of performance of this class, you can see that they've just given us 2018, 2019 is just about to happen. My suspicion is that you're likely to see more or less the same thing, If statistics is anything to go by, and you get close to Professor Volmik, he'll tell you that large systems take a long time to change. And then qualification types, you can then see that there's an increase in diplomas. Can you see that? 25.8%. Higher certificate, 12.9%. And what people always fight with us about, which is about this 30%, look at it, it's not even a percent. NSC is zero. It's not even look at it, nationally. Bachelor pass, in terms of percentage, well, you can see that we've moved up. Our highest was 33.6, and again, I'm praying very hard that we maintain this, otherwise some of us are going to be fired, I'm telling you. I've heard that in some provinces, some firing has started already, and God should help us. Well, the actual numbers, those are the numbers. Well, yeah, just a few minutes we'll get to know about all of this. Well, this is what the president calls a silent revolution. In 2005, fee-paying schools contributed 60 to 80% of bachelors in 2005. Fast forward, 2019. I'm now giving you this. This is authentic. Your quintile 1 to 3 schools contribute 55.4% of bachelors, compared to 44.6% of quintile 4 and 5. The president calls it a silent revolution. He says we almost reached a holy crucible. He said to us, I'm giving you 2 more years to make sure that in 2 years' time, 60% of bachelors come from your quintile 1 to 3 schools, and 40% from quintile 4 and 5. This is significant because these are schools that used to be, in 2009 and 2010, the diagnostic report of the National Planning Commission said 80% of our schools are dysfunctional. And this increase in quintile 1 to 3 schools come from those schools that used to be dysfunctional. Those schools are able to produce a learner with 9 distinctions. 9 distinctions. Progressed learners, well, we've given you everything there, categories. We've also given you some very interesting statistics, but the graph, pie graph, it then shows how, provinces have performed. You can see this year, Northwest is leading the pack, followed by Mpumalanga, and followed by KZN. Now, because the majority, in fact, let me not say majority, about 6 provinces, it's majority, 6 provinces have reached 80%. For you to move further beyond 80%, if you have progressed learners, it's an area that you need to pay attention to. The other area that you need to pay attention to is home language. Because if a learner fails a home language, even if that learner would pass all the subjects with distinctions, that learner is going to fail. So you can see how provinces have performed here. Well, schools' performance by quintile again, another area that the president calls a silent revolution is schools getting 80 to 100%. There's been a phenomenal increase. You can see in 2018, for 80 to 100, we had 2,934. And in 2019, we've got an increase there, which moves to 3,495. The same applies to schools obtaining 100%. You can see in 2018, it's 3,051. It increases to 439. The sad story, it's those schools that are getting 0%. You can see from 11, we have increased to 16. 5 more schools joined. And this is something that we should make sure that it's not happening going forward. Performance in selected subjects at a threshold of 30%. We've performed better in all subjects except for economics, life sciences, and mathematics. You can see mathematics has slightly dropped there. 40% threshold, the same thing. We've dropped there. Home languages, we need to pay more attention to our home languages. MEC Tate, you can see they are hemorrhaging. There's been a drop in the performance of our home languages. First additional language, doing well there. District performance, in 2018, those are the districts. 2 provinces had their districts performing at 80% and above. In 2018, Gauteng and Free State. In 2019, those provinces are still maintaining 80% and above. They have now been joined by the Northwest Province. Those 3 provinces have all their districts performing at 80% and above. Well, these are the 10 top districts in the Republic of South Africa. We can see that district number 1 is Tshwane South, district number 2 is Gauteng North, district number 3 is Tshwane North, and Fezile Dabi is number 4, and Fezile Dabi has been number 1 for the past 2 to 3 years. It's only this year that they've dropped. Out of the top 10 districts, Gauteng accounts for 6 of these districts, and the rest are shared. Free State has it has 2, and then you have Northern Cape Namakwa, and then Bojana Ala Platinum Northwest. These are the bottom 10 districts, MEC Schaefer. These are the guys that we need to give sleepless nights to get us up, to maintain up. Learners with special education needs, the highest number of learners who enrolled and who performed, you can see the writing is on the wall. They come from the Western Cape, every step of the way. Whether you look at bachelors, whether you look at diplomas, whether you look at national, all the way, it's Western Cape, as you can see. Distinctions in terms of percentage, Western Cape is leading the pack. In terms of the actual number, KZN has got the highest, followed by Gauteng, and then Western Cape. And of course, you know that the number depends on the population and so on. The right reflection would, of course, be percentages, as you can see there. Percentages in terms of selected subjects, accounting didn't do as well this year. You know, we're so happy with the performance of accounting in 2018. In 2019, something just collapsed. And then you can see economics also and geography, and the rest went up. Progressed learners, and my slogan there, MEC KZN, is that umuntu akalahlwa. Umuntu akalahlwa. There are progressed learners who got distinctions, Dr. Rakomesi, in mathematics, 12 of them. There are progressed learners who got distinctions in physical science, 25 of them, believe it or not. So, umuntu akalahlwa. There is no dustbin for human beings. That's in short what I'm trying to say. Social grants, you can see that's overall performance. My time is up. The team is saying my time is up. Now, this is very interesting, CEO, and I was trying to analyze the performance of the active and inactive. When you reach age 18, you no longer get a child support grant. In fact, you won't get any of the grants. Now look at the performance of those who are still getting this grant. Somebody might say, I mean, what can you do with 300 rand? 300 rand to somebody who's got nothing, it's something. 300 rand to somebody like me who's got something, it's nothing, maybe. But it's a very interesting analysis that we might have to look at. And I can see members of the portfolio committee are saying to me, you are in for a hiding when we meet next time. You'll have to explain what you are saying. Social grant performance by gender. Does the gender split? and different categories of performance there, you can see. Correctional services, we've provided data for full-time candidates there. Very nice. 93.5%. Can you see that? There are not many candidates, but very good. Somebody said, these guys have got nothing to do during exams but to study. And so colleagues in the correctional services centers are doing an excellent job. I've been invited, by the way, to go and attend their function this week, on Thursday in Kimberley. They'll be celebrating these results. Part-time candidates, and then part-time, we've not done that well, and part of the problem, Dr. Rakometsi, or let me not say the problem, how we interpret this data, we've now combined the old senior certificate and the national senior certificate. So the analysis of data must be viewed in that context. Otherwise, it might be viewed wrongly. Summary, I'm not going to, we use the 6 principles of social justice, which are used worldwide to determine the performance of education systems. Worldwide, in the world, to determine whether an education system is working or not. The 6 principles are used even by UNESCO. We've reflected on that. I'm not going to waste your time. We're indicating the enrollment. We're indicating even the passes and so on. Redress, fee-paying and no fee-paying schools, we're indicating that. We've indicated how your no fee-paying schools are actually catching up with fee-paying schools, which is quite interesting. Equity, we particularly look at equity in terms of gender. Girl learners tend to stay at school and finish within the required time more than boy learners. Despite what is reported about learner pregnancy should not happen to our young girls or our young women in our schools and so on. But they finish within the required time more than boy learners, as I have shown in the data and the slides. And I mean, you can also see that, and I think when we talk about efficiency, it will show that as well. Quality, we look at bachelors across the board. We also look at the number of distinctions. This is what I was talking about, efficiency. 60.4% of our young people finish within 12 years. Within 12 years of schooling. And the rest take much longer to finish, which is costly to the state. Our system is also punitive. We retain learners, and the research, the abundant knowledge of research, which shows that retaining learners is detrimental to their performance. They don't get to do better because they are retained. In fact, the adverse is true. I'm not advocating pass one, pass all. I've seen courses is no pass one, pass all. Inclusivity is just the data that we have reflected in terms of learners with special education needs. And in conclusion, we're just saying we are a system on the rise. We've seen an improvement, social justice principles. There's an overall improvement in the system. No province performs below 70%. And by the way, 6 of the 9 provinces are sitting comfortably at 80%. I'm saying 6 of the 9 provinces are sitting comfortably at 80%. You can do your arithmetic. Then you can tell the nation where we are heading. Conclusion, well, we also woefully aware that whilst we celebrate the improvement, there are serious concerns around gateway subjects which we need to pay attention to. We are the first ones to acknowledge that, and we are doing something about it. Enrollment in accounting, enrollment in maths, enrollment in other subjects as indicated earlier on. Enrollment in technical subjects, but also learners with special education needs, proper support for South African Sign Language, so that these learners who are offering this subject are properly supported. And raising the bar. And our intention, we are putting this to the Council of Education Ministers, is that maybe before the end of this term, we might even consider not talking about 30% anymore, but talking about 40% minimum across the board. I thought it would be appropriate to end with the vision of the National Development Plan. I'm sure you'll agree with me that having shared this mountain of data with you, that we can confirm that as what the National Development Vision seemed to suggest, that we began to tell a new story then, and we have lived and renewed that story along the way. 2030 is left only with 10 years as we enter 2020. And we've been part of remaking our history. Thank you very much for indulging me.
Thank you, DG. Can we give the DG another round of applause, please? We just need to indicate, earlier the DG referred to 141 marking centers. And for your information, to let you know that he visited 113 of that 141 marking centers within 10 days. So he knows what he's talking about. Before we move on, I would like to acknowledge the presence of the Excellency, the Premier of the Free State. And we've been joined by the MECs, and we've also had in our presence the chairperson of the Select Committee and the members of the Select Committee, the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee and the members of the Portfolio Committee. I've also picked up that we have the chairperson of the National Education Collaboration Trust. If we have not acknowledged you, our apologies, but all protocols are observed, and the minister may mention those we have not spoken about. Now, thank you for your patience and indulgence in listening to the presentation. Within an hour, the minister will address this gathering and the live broadcast to the nation. So we'll adjourn at this moment, and you can have the next 30 minutes to take a body break, and please be back after 5:30. By 15 minutes to 6, the auditorium would need to be ready for the live broadcast. So thank you, and we have adjourned.